education is doing the exact opposite. They are
That's right.
indoctrinating our kids with this propaganda.
I've only recently sort of come to the realization that we, not just Jews, but decent people who care about these issues and who are appalled by what they're seeing, we have to start realizing no one's coming to the rescue. No technocrat, no Elon, no Mark Zuckerberg's going to come in here and fix these issues on social media. That's not going to, no, it's not going to happen. No political leader is going to come in and fix this. No, this is going to take generational work. We have to do more and stop complaining less.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Yasmine Mohammed podcast. Today, my guest is Dr. Casey Babb. You might have read about him in the Free Press article that just came out the other day. This episode may not come out until a few weeks from now, but we are now just 13th of December. And what we're going to talk about today is all the anti-Semitism that has been occurring all across Canada. And I'm sure between now and by the time this episode airs, unfortunately, there's probably going to be even more things that we're not going to have a chance to talk about. But we're going to try to fit in as much as we can in the next hour and a half. And I could not have chosen a better person to speak about this topic today. Dr. Casey Babb is a senior fellow at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute in Canada, a fellow with the Institute for National Security Studies in Tel Aviv, an associate fellow with the Royal United Services Institute in London, and an advisor with Secure Canada in Toronto. So in this episode, we're going to discuss all the anti-Semitic issues erupting in Canada, how they're impacting our politics, our education system, and the world. So, Dr. Casey Babb, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So we're going to discuss today something is rotten in the state of Canada. And let's start off with your new project at the Institute, at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. It's called the Promised Land Project. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, so the Promised Land program at MLI is really, the first program of its kind in the country, focused on combating anti-Semitism, raising awareness about it, doing the same thing when it comes to rising extremism, which is a serious issue in Canada and throughout most countries across the West and abroad. And improving the sort of dialogue, the conversation when it comes to fact-based information related to Israel and the broader Middle East, an issue which, in our view, is seriously contributing to anti-Semitism and extremism. So we're busy with that. We have the Promised Land podcast. We're doing a number of live events. We recently had Einat Wilf in from Israel, who's also been named a senior fellow at MLI on the Promised Land program. We had Arsen Ostrovsky in recently. Hopefully we'll have you in recently or soon. And we're constantly writing about these issues and trying to get sort of, senior fellows and program staff in the media as much as possible to talk about these things.
And I'm sure you must be very busy because, unfortunately, since October 7th, the rise of anti-Semitic attacks in Canada, it's been an increase of 670% in anti-Semitic incidents in the past year. 670%.
Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about that? Because you're saying that you're trying to educate the public. Do you think that this has a lot to do with just ignorance and misunderstanding? How can you explain all the attacks on the synagogues, on the Jewish schools? What is happening? What is going on here? How could there be such a huge increase in anti-Semitic attacks in such a short amount of time?
Well, I think a lot of the issues that are contributing to the current situation have been, festering, have been growing, and we've been nurturing these things for many, many decades in Canada. It was the spark of October 7th that unleashed a lot of it. And this isn't to say that, there's that I can cover all of the issues or that I have the answer to that I can point to everything that's contributing to what's been happening. But, there's really been a convergence of the left or far left, however you want to describe this sort of group or camp of people, the far right, and also religiously motivated extremists and Islamists in the country, and there are many. And our immigration policies have really contributed to that. And as I've written about before, and I state time and time again, I talked about this in the Globe and Mail just shortly after October 7th, that anti-Semitism, which I prefer to just call Jew hatred because it is anti-Semitism sounds just so academic
Clinical.
and
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Let's
nice
get
and safe. It's
directly
a
to it.
comfortable, yeah. It's about hating
Hmm.
Jews. Uh, that has been the through line, which has united for many years and many decades all actors across the ideological spectrum, and so we're seeing that now in the country, across the country, and you're seeing a lack of political will at virtually every level to combat these things. Um, and there's mis and disinformation that is being spread um, in an unprecedented way that is really adding fuel to the fire. So that's why you're seeing, it's a culmination of, everything from immigration to lacking political will to the normalization of anti-Zionism, which we can talk about further, which in my view is the most pervasive and perverse form of contemporary anti-Semitism. It's all of these things. They've created this sort of perfect storm. And as I talked to Terry Glavin about in the Free Press in that article you mentioned, it's created this really horrific situation here in the country. Um, and people don't know how to speak about it, let alone come up with solutions to address it. And Jews and particularly Israelis have become political fodder over the last 80 years for different, actors in the political space to sort of exploit and use to their strategic advantage. And that's what we've seen. And that's exactly what Tom Mulcair was talking about in reference to Melanie Joly sort of confiding in him, which I don't know why she would do. Her rationale for taking certain actions is because of her constituents. So there are a lot of these issues that have sort of converged, and I don't think anti-Semitism has ever been this bad in the country, in the history of the country. Of course, we have a history in Canada of turning away Jews from the Holocaust, who indeed ended up perishing in the Holocaust because of our abhorrent policies to turn them away. But that is that's a different time, and conceptually, the way that I think about that period, it's very different than what we're seeing now, and I don't think we've ever seen things as bad as they are right now in the country.
I 100% agree with
Yeah,
you. Um, let's talk a little bit about Selena Robinson because her story is pretty crazy. So she was a minister for post-secondary schools in BC. And she spoke up against a college professor who said, who was basically celebrating the October 7th attacks and
mm,
saying that it was beautiful and brave or something like the words he was using were just mind-blowingly, shockingly
yeah,
offensive.
yeah,
Crazy. And you would think that the person who is speaking up against this man celebrating terrorism would be the hero in this scenario, or at least the normal person in this scenario. But it turns out that she was so basically, with pitchforks, they went after her until she was forced to resign from her job
yeah,
because she had the audacity to speak up against a professor who was celebrating October 7th. I mean, it's a kind of mind-blowing thing. People don't understand, I think. Let's talk a little bit about the politics of Canada because that was the
yeah,
NDP. So that's like far left. I
yeah,
mean, in Canada, we basically have left, left, and more left, really. We're
yeah,
no,
yeah.
you can't really compare us to left and right the way you would in America, for
Yeah, Bernie
example.
Sanders in Canada would be like, Dick Cheney. Like it's like we're a very left country. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And supposedly on the left, they care about minorities, they care about, human lives. They are against terrorism, you would assume, right? But we're at the point in this country where we have something called anti-Palestinian,
Hmm.
there's an
Racism,
anti-Palestinianism or something. Alice, that's
anti-Palestinian
right,
racism.
anti-Palestinian
Yeah,
racism.
yeah,
So that she was being attacked for being an anti-Palestinian racist.
yeah,
And anybody who tries to speak up in any way, just
hmm,
stating basic facts, basic truths about Israel and
yeah,
Palestine,
yeah,
historical facts,
yeah,
those people are attacked with anti-Palestinian racism, which is this new thing that they've come up with, this new bludgeon that they've come up with to
yeah.
attack people and to keep them in line. It's in many ways like the term Islamophobia. It's just a
That's
way
right.
to stifle criticism so that
That's right.
their narrative, whatever it may be, is the only narrative that's allowed to be heard.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a cult, right? And it's cult-like thinking. And I know about it. I've spent the majority of my adult life in university classrooms and university hallways across the country. Um, and it's why I probably will never teach at a university again. It's too toxic. Um, and, there's so many different ways we could approach this, but at the heart of Palestinianism, which has become a cult like sort of ideology and movement, is the rejection of Jewish autonomy and sovereignty in any part between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea, which is what when they say from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. That's what they're talking about. We just have a tendency in the West to either um, uh, typically to not listen and to not hear, and we also have this tendency to um, ANAT talks about these things, sort of indirectly, but where we when things are too unvarnished or they're too counter to the Canadian way of thinking, if there is such a thing, we typically West-splain our way through it, or we say, well, they probably don't mean that literally. They probably don't even, let's not, yes, they say it at every opportunity, and they always have, but they don't mean it. And so there's that part of it too, where we almost have this strategic blindness when it comes to listening to protesters, when it comes to listening to university professors. We just go, no, like that's too much. Because if we accept that, then it challenges the sort of, then we, God forbid, would have to do some soul searching and reflect on our own beliefs and who we think we are as a people, individually and collectively as a nation. But in terms of these sort of ideas, it's also become, in some sort of perverse, paradoxical way, we don't want to, we fear being called racist. And I wrote about this in the National Post last week or the week prior. What everyone in Canada is most afraid of is being called intolerant or racist. And because we view these things as so inextricably linked to Palestinianism, people don't people feel uncomfortable by calling these things out. And in fact, those who do, as you were just referencing that particular case, and that happens all the time, those people are actually vilified and ostracized because if you don't do that, then you could be considered a racist or intolerant. And so that's just this weird sort of toxic cycle we're in right now. And there's a lot of cases like that where people um, say things and they're punished for it, or they come out and sort of sound the alarm about something somebody else has said, and then they have to pay the price. But there are also these cases that I've experienced as well, and I'm sure others like Anat and yourself have, you know, you lose out on opportunities because people are afraid that you might say something that is too real. It's too revealing, and it's counter to what we want to believe, not what is probably the reality. So I'm not surprised by that particular case. This is a very unfortunate sort of part of not just the Jewish experience right now, but the decent experience, the civilized experience, and it's what we're experiencing right now throughout Canada and the West. But conversations like this hopefully help over time erode some of these issues.
I hope so, because, that inability to just accept what the person in front of you is telling you, they are like, we have research showing that there are 40% of the Muslims surveyed in Canada say that suicide bombs that target Israeli citizens is justified. 40% of Canadian Muslims believe that targeting Israeli citizens with
Mm-hmm.
suicide bombs is
Mm-hmm.
justified. I mean, that's mind-blowing to me. So it's really hard for me to believe that you could be a Canadian and wanting to continue to keep your head in the sand. You want to pretend that everything is like,
Yeah,
that if
but
I say anything about that, then that's against my diversity and inclusion. But you're supporting, you are providing cover for, you are empowering people who are blatantly telling you we are okay with innocent people being killed as long as they are Israelis.
yeah, that's just it. But you, you being Canadian, to be Canadian, to be American, to be any sort of nationality requires a lot more than a piece of paper. And unfortunately, I'm not particularly surprised. I hadn't heard that data point before about the 40%, but it doesn't surprise me. In fact, it sounds a little, I mean, it sounds like it could be even on the lower side than what I maybe would have imagined. And that's, as I said clearly in the Free Press article, that's not to say that Canada's Arab community or Canada's Muslim community should be viewed through some sort of prism of anti-Semitism. That I would caution people to not do that. Um, but I also said in that article, when you have people coming from countries that have literally purged their entire Jewish populations, and where anti Semitism or Jew hatred, whether it's conspiratorial, whether it's religiously motivated, when you have them, they don't abandon these views when they go to and they settle in Germany or they settle in Canada or Holland or Australia. It's not, so, and you have to think about what happens in the living room, in homes. What second generation, third generation immigrants are learning. These views aren't being abandoned. They are,
Mhm,
in many cases, integral foundational elements of the Middle Eastern experience.
mhm,
Um, and but we can't talk about that, because if we talk about that, then you're racist, then you're
mhm,
intolerant. Um,
mhm,
I don't have a problem talking about it, because I would rather be called intolerant or something else than, killed, or have
mhm.
my country or other countries that I love and value be turned into something that is um, problematic, to say the least. But
Mhm.
these ideas are imported here in mass, and they have been for decades. And then at the same time, there are other issues, there are other factors that are contributing to this. The first, and in no particular order, is that we, unlike many other countries, we're not only do we lack a clear sort of cohesive Canadian identity, and it really irritates me when I have, and I love some of these people who come to Canada, and they mean well, and there's some of them are friends of mine, or people I'm very friendly with. But they'll come here, and like the handful of things they do is they'll like get a Tim Hortons coffee and be like, "I'm so happy to be in Canada," or they'll see like kids playing hockey and they'll post about it on social media, or they'll make a joke about going to a hockey game or eating Timbits or like getting a beaver tail, and it's like they do that because there's no other Canadian element of our identity that they can anchor themselves to go, hey, I'm here in this great country. I'm here in this country with this amazing identity that everybody in the world knows about. I think our identity, the way that we are marketed and viewed internationally, is probably as a country that lacks an identity where you can enter and you can be yourself, and you don't have to, there's no expectation for you to abandon any part of you or any part of your ideological sort of foundation when you come here. Come here and be who you are.
Mhm.
Our prime minister said 10 years ago in the New York Times
Mhm.
that there is no Canadian identity. He said that in the New York Times 10 years ago, before he was prime minister. There's no Canadian identity. And he's also referred to Canada as the first post nation state, whatever the hell that means. I mean,
Mhm.
what is meant by that, presumably, is that we are a country void of any sort of cohesive, collective, unifying force.
Mhm.
We are what you want it to be, and you can be who you want to be in this country, and you can do what you want in this nation, and you don't have to adhere to any sort of particular Canadian way. There is no Canadian way. So we tell people that, and then we get upset when people come here and they say they want to build a bomb and detonate it on a Jewish rally on Parliament Hill. We go, oh my God, don't act surprised. We've been telling people,
Mhm.
just be who you are, come on in.
Mhm.
We've been doing this for decades and decades, and it's getting people killed, and we have to
You're
stop doing
absolutely
that.
right. You're absolutely correct. Concur with every single thing you've said. I think it's quite ironic that we're now unified in our hate against Justin Trudeau, though. So he didn't want us to have any uniting elements, but we do now. But schools are supposed to be the place, because everything you said
Yeah.
is absolutely correct. I grew up in exactly what you described, not only in my living room, but in the mosque, in the Islamic school. These ideas do not have borders. They travel in the minds of the people that we are inviting
That,
into our
that,
country. And the only saving grace, the only light of hope would be our public education system. That can be the place where we can start to counter this kind of hate, counter this propaganda with some honest, truth, historical facts. But what's happening in our Canadian schools, unfortunately, is exactly the opposite. The school boards have adopted Nakba Day as a holiday or as a day of notoriety or
yeah.
something like that.
And
They
how could
have
they
this,
not? How
right?
could they not?
They've got this anti-Palestinian racism that we talked about. That's part of the curriculum.
Yeah.
There was Remembrance Day ceremonies are now including Gazan songs. I've
Mm-hmm.
seen the head of the teachers union wearing a keffiyeh and calling
Mm-hmm.
Hamas resistance and freedom
Mm-hmm.
fighters. It's education is doing the exact opposite. They are
That's right.
indoctrinating our kids with this propaganda.
That's
So
right.
what can we do? How can we push back? Where is some ray of hope or some ray of light that you see?
Look, I've only really started thinking about, well, I've always been thinking about these issues, but I've only recently sort of come to the realization that, and I said this, I spoke at the Illinois Holocaust Museum relatively recently, a couple of times, and I said this in front of an audience there as well. We, not just Jews, but decent people who care about these issues and who are appalled by what they're seeing, we have to start realizing, and a lot of minority groups know this. Jews, I think, know this. They just need to be reminded of it. Other minority groups know this, maybe even better. No one's coming to the rescue. Like, no technocrat, no Elon, no Mark Zuckerberg's going to come in here and like fix these issues on social media. That's not going to, no, it's not going to happen. No political leader is going to come in and fix this. I'm floored by the amount of people who, yeah, I can understand why there's people on both sides of the camp who would be mortified that there's an incoming Trump presidency, and I can understand why people would think that there's a positive change that could come with that. But people who are looking at an incoming Trump presidency, who think that Trump and Mr. Kushner and other family members are really going to be able to turn things around here, and it's going to be a safe space for Jews again. And all of these issues that are coming with immigration policies or lack thereof, they're going to be corrected. It's like, no, this is going to take generational work. Um, and I believe that we have to stop. We have to do more and stop complaining less. I mean, a lot of the people that are sort of um, exploiting their positions in our society for this really perverse ideological gain and campaign that they're so bizarrely committed to. It's very strange. They are in positions that most people don't want to be in. They're just too busy. They're too comfortable. They go, oh, whatever. These people are nuts. Whatever. And then they turn around and a lot of folks will turn around and go, well, our school boards are a disaster. Our municipal politics, our unions. Okay, so get on the union then. Get on the union. Become a school board trustee then. Get involved with municipal politics. Get involved with community groups. We have to start taking these roles back if we want to steer the ship in the right direction. And there are a lot of positions and a lot of roles that they're busy. They don't want to, if you're a consultant, you're at McKinsey, you don't want to go be a school board trustee. If you're, working 9 to 5 as a mechanic, but these issues bother you, do you really want to go take the time to go sit on this board or get involved with your union to talk about these issues? Or if you're a government employee and you're an EC5 and you're comfy and everything's good in Ottawa and you have your pension and you can go out for drinks and you can go to whatever restaurant. Don't complain then. You get involved with the union and do something. I think we have to wake up and start really taking the reins here. And we have to start voting. Vote the way, if you don't complain, but also not vote. Or don't be involved with politics. Yeah, people have to start getting involved. And I think people have to also start being a little bit more open with how they feel. Sometimes people, not sometimes, actually quite often, people will say, oh, I saw that article you wrote. That was really brave of you. That took a lot of courage. I'm like, it took zero courage or zero bravery for me to write that. It's just how I think. This is
And
an issue that
they'll send you a private message or something. They won't actually publicly write that.
yeah, people go, exactly. People go, oh, that's so brave that you said that. I go, we're getting killed out here. What else are you supposed to say?
Mhm.
Don't be the second or third person to say something. Be the first person to say something in your community, in your home, in the workplace. Because if you self-censor yourself, it makes the process of censoring you so much easier for other people. You're doing it on your own. So you got to get loud. You have to get out there. You have to get involved with these places that these ideological, parasites have embedded themselves. That's sort of my tangent on that.
Mhm. No, and it's a beautiful tangent, and it's one that I get into a lot on this podcast because Canada is still a free country. We are losing a lot of our freedoms, but we're still a free country. America is obviously, the freest country on the planet. We're not in the Islamic Republic of Iran. We're not in
No,
Afghanistan under
not
the
yet.
Taliban. We're not in Saudi Arabia. Yeah, so at this moment, it reminds me of Christopher Hitchens when he said, resist while you still can.
That's
We
it.
still can at this point. And if we could just be like, you know, 5% more courageous and less cowardly, then it would make a huge difference. But what you were suggesting there of joining school boards and becoming a trustee and this, that, and the other thing, people feel hesitant to do that because they know that they are going to be surrounded by
Yeah.
people who are going to make life difficult for them. And so they don't want to deal with that. And I understand that. But it's like you said, somebody has to be the tip of the spear. As soon as one person speaks up, and I've seen this happen countless times, where I say something with my voice shaking and my knees like rattling, and I'm thinking they're gonna just decimate me for this, but I'm gonna say it anyway because I'm not going to, sacrifice my integrity and bite my tongue. I have to say this. And as soon as I say it, like a dozen or 20
That's
other
it.
people agree with me,
That's
but
it.
they just don't want to be the first ones to do it. So I really hope that people will start to realize that if you do have the ability and the means to do this, to take on positions, whether it's in political positions, education, wherever it is, journalism, whatever you can do
Hmm.
to speak your mind freely in whatever areas that you can in Canada, please do that, because there will be people behind you who will support you, but they just don't want to be the
Yeah.
first ones in line. But we can all, take a page from Iranian women's,
Yeah.
to take a page from their book. Sarah just shared with me a woman in Iran who was singing, which is against the law in Iran for a woman's voice to be heard publicly, with her hair uncovered, which again, of course, everyone knows is against the law. And she posted this publicly on YouTube, doing two things that could get her killed. And
Hmm.
I'm not asking you to do that. I'm not
That's it.
asking you to
That's
risk your
it.
life to that
Yeah.
extent. I'm
That's
just
it.
asking you to
That's
say,
real
yeah,
bravery.
terrorism isn't bad. I'm asking you, when you've got, politicians in Canada comparing Yahya Sinwar to Nelson Mandela, I need you to speak up about that. I need you to counter that and let it be known that this is such dangerous propaganda and that we are going in an incredibly dangerous direction. We were already knee deep in a dangerous direction.
Yeah.
We're not
Oh
just
yeah.
headed there.
No.
And we have to speak up now, or we will lose our right to speak entirely.
Exactly. And I think people also need to start in our society, in our culture, we like instant gratification. We want quick returns on investment, um, whether that's financially or in the classroom or whatever. We want to get our money's worth. We want to get through whatever it is we're going through and reach a better result, be in a better position as absolutely as quickly as possible. And again, authors have written about this. ANAT has a wonderful article about this, which I can share at another time. I think it's several years old. But I just want to sort of draw a connection here in terms of how different camps think. Um,
Mhm.
when we talk about Israel and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, it irritates me when people say, "Oh, this is an intractable conflict. It's going to go on forever." There's no go. It's only been going on. It depends on when you want to start the clock, but let's say 100 years. 100 years is not that long. This could go on for another 500 years or 1,000 years, but it will be resolved. I believe in a way that is favorable to Israel and the Jewish people. Um, we need to start thinking about these things here in that way as well. I think there's this tendency of people to go, well, why should I even vote? My vote's not going to make a difference. Like what matter does it's not going to make any difference. Same with school boards. They go, well, I could become a trustee, but it's a hostile environment and it's not going to lead to anything. Or I could get involved with my union, but everybody there is left leaning and they're adopting these anti-Palestinian racism narratives and all of the XYZ. But if we keep having that attitude, cumulatively, it's going to lead to just the acceleration of our decline. If
Of
we
course.
if we chip away at these things over time, because I don't really think about these things in terms of myself. I don't. It doesn't matter how many papers I write or books or podcasts I do. In 20 years, I don't think I'm going to be able to look around and go, my God, it's completely different now than it was 20 years ago. I don't really think so. But I think if we keep doing these things, my grandchildren could be living in a much different country, or for the better. And if we do not do these things, this country could be unrecognizable for our
Mhm.
grandchildren and especially our grandchildren's children.
Mhm.
Um, so I just want people to keep in mind that this problem that we find ourselves seized with, that we feel compelled to do something about, it isn't even just our problem. In fact, it isn't even really our problem in some ways because it's our lives will continue to be this good and this fruitful and easy and comfortable for the rest of our lives. It's just probably the way that it's going to work out. But this is a problem for future generations that we have to start addressing now or yesterday if we don't want things to erode terribly quickly. So just on the matter
Yes,
of time.
completely agree. And I wanted to bring it back to when you were talking about Trudeau and our country being a post-nation
Yeah.
state. I really believe in these past 10 years he's been in office, that has really eroded the way we think of ourselves as well. And it's caused this environment that we're in. It's like the staff room. Nobody really takes accountability for cleaning the staff room, taking care of the staff room because it's not yours, it's not mine, it's just everybody. So nobody's really paying attention to it. So as Canadians, if we don't feel this is our country. We value it. We have to take care of it. We have to love it. We have to support it. We have to maintain our values in a strong, unapologetic manner. Then we're leaving it to the others who really do have strong values and
Well,
who
that's
really
it.
do take accountability and who really do care and who really will put in all the time and energy and effort that's required while we're over here being complacent. It's such an easy equation. 2 + 2 is 4. You can see the end of the road here. That if
Yeah.
we don't start to push back, if we don't start to have pride in our country, and want to protect our country from this kind of hate, then of course we're going to lose. And this isn't just Canada. This is also, we can see this happening in the UK. We can see this happening all over Europe. We don't see it happening in America quite yet, thankfully.
Hmm.
But it is something that unfortunately, it's like this human
Well,
nature thing where we just get too complacent, too comfortable. And the other side is not complacent and they're not
yeah.
comfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. And just one other thing I wanted to add on to this, um, and I'm not trying to plug my work. I mentioned it already. This
Please do.
article that I
That's why
had
you're
in
here.
the National Post, but add layered onto these issues is the fact that not only is there sort of a lacking Canadian identity, which I'm not suggesting that is true. I think we actually have a very strong Canadian identity. We just need to be reminded of what that is and
Yeah.
remind ourselves
Yeah.
of what that is.
And
Um,
we have to apologize for our Canadian identity, Casey.
well,
This is
this is
where
what
we've
I'm getting at.
become, yeah. Okay,
We
go
have
ahead.
learned, we have learned and been told directly and indirectly, and I believe many people have come to accept this either consciously or subconsciously, that not only do we not have a strong Canadian identity, but we are undeserving of our place in the world, of our land that we may or may not own, of our presence in the country. We are consistently told that we are the greatest way that we can sort of affirm our virtue is by confirming our guilt, and we've learned to be perpetually guilty, constantly guilty of things that we've had nothing to do with. And in doing this, we have disarmed ourselves, disarmed our psyche and our ideological sort of equilibrium to feel as though we have any. How dare we talk about other people and what they might believe? We're just here. We're just lucky to be. We shouldn't even be here. So there's that element of it too. And you see this a lot in Canada and Australia. And I would encourage people to read
Yes.
a fantastic book by Kirsch on this idea of colonialism that we've been taught to feel guilty about ourselves.
I'm
So
a
if you're
settler.
if
Hmm.
you believe consciously or subconsciously in your own guilt, it disarms you in a way to come out and fight for something that you should believe in, but have now lost the ability to recognize.
Beautifully said. Thank you. All right, we are going to open it up to questions and comments from the group here. And the first person with her hand up is my dear friend, Shauna.
I'm so flattered that you would call me your dear friend. That was just like the second highlight of my year. First one was when you came on my podcast. So thank you so much. Thank you both for this conversation. And if possible, I just want to sort of preface this by pointing out um the not so subtle irony of people who are quote unquote like deathly afraid of being called racist, exercising their voices by calling for jihad against the Jews. There's that.
Right?
um, but the real problem, honestly, isn't the anti-Semitism per se. It has always been there. It will always be there. But it's the vast apologism, which Apple is telling me is not even a word. Now it is. Acceptance and the normalization of both, like, by both the government and Canadian society. I'm saying Canadian, I mean really the whole Western world. And as long as the silent majority is intimidated into complete submission, like right now, I feel like, particularly because of social media, we have no real choice but like to slide down this rabbit hole. Now, I know personally, as whatever, a social media influencer, the people who are in my space, which is the yoga space, the space of light and love, are utterly afraid to speak out about Israel. Like 100% all I get is DMs. And I understand it. Like when you are posting and what comes back from your peace-loving community is the most vile,
Oh, of course,
violent,
of course.
anti-Semitic, like words that would never come out of my mouth. Um, I understand people don't want to submit themselves to that because they're witnessing it. It scares them to death. And I know that Yasmine, you've talked about like, oh, their words, right? It's not like on penalty of death. But I can also tell you that as a previously world-renowned yoga instructor, um, it has just like 100% destroyed my career, like 100% destroyed my career by speaking up, not just for Israel, but literally against anti-Semitism. So I guess my question, I had to switch a little from what I wrote because you really answered it, is that I feel as if even those of us who have been paying attention to this for a long time and have been in this fight for decades, the reaction to 10/7 surprised us all. There's no question.
Right.
Um, but as much as it snuck up on us, it was still decades in the making, right? It's like when somebody says, oh, that actor's an overnight sensation, they don't see the 20 years
Right.
auditions behind it, right? I fear it's going to take, even in the West, forget about the Middle East, a minimum of 2 generations to deprogram this, right? Because I'm seeing the parents, right, of the kids who are just as drunk on the anti-Semitism as the kids themselves these days. I had the most bizarre conversation with a girl yesterday who's 25 years old, who told me they did a year on comparative religion, a year, and all they talked about was Islam. I guess the assumption being most of you are already Christian and who cares about the Jews. It befuddled me. So I
Sorry,
guess,
Sean, I'm gonna have to pull you to your
yeah, yeah,
question, please.
So
Yeah.
my question is like, so how many generations is it really going to take before we turn this ship around? Or how are we going to turn it around if people are so closed-minded to reality anymore?
Well, Yasmin, I don't know if you have thoughts on that, but from my perspective, there's no. All we can do is keep trying, and I've talked about this idea of time, about injecting yourself into these um, positions that a lot of people just don't want to take the time to be involved with. About not being the second or third or fourth person to say certain things. But then there also has to be an element as well of making. We have to find better ways of ensuring that people see themselves in these problems because most people also um, again, I mean, I talked about this in the Times of Israel, Western stupidity. So there's an element of that. There's an element of people just, they don't know, they don't understand these things. They don't really care to understand these things. They go, oh, Jews, the Middle East, Israel, like whatever. You know, have you seen the cost of baby formula? Do you know how much it is to get a Big Mac these days? How much gas is? Like they don't care because they see these issues as things that have been going on for 1,000 years and everything's going to be fine. They need to see themselves in in the fight, in what this is about, and most people don't. I mean, I can't fault them for that. If you go to Costco and you come home and you cook and you go to school or you go to work or you whatever, and you just be doing that for 10 years or 5 years or most of your life, so what? We have to find ways of tapping into new communities, other communities, and ensuring that they see themselves in this situation. I often talk about Israel as being the world's commando unit in the fight against fanaticism and extremism. But even when I say that, people don't even really know what I mean by that. So I think we need to do a better job at doing, maybe even speaking about what other countries have gone through, what this could mean for certain communities if these trends continue, what certain communities would face in other nations, things of that nature. But, you know, in terms of how long this takes, I don't know. But I do know that if we just lay down and go, well, what can we do about it? It's their side of this equation is going to speed up quite a bit.
Yeah. First they came for the socialists, but I was not a socialist,
Yeah.
so I didn't say anything. You know, it's an old story,
Yeah.
unfortunately. Mars, you're next.
Thank you, Yasmin. Casey, I have a question for you regarding Canadian politics. To give you a little bit of a background, I'm involved with a variety of groups and organizations as a volunteer to deal with this woke
Mm-hmm.
bastardization that we have going on across the United States and in the Western world. One of the themes that is passed around for people who are really interested in pushing back is, as you and Yasmin were just alluding to, is that people have to get involved in school boards and
Mm-hmm.
elections, what have you. We just had an election here in the United States,
Mm-hmm.
and I understand that
What
you have
happened? No, I'm kidding. I know one.
I'll leave that. I'll put that aside for the
Yeah,
moment. But the I understand. You have to forgive my ignorance here because I know next to nothing about Canadian politics.
sure.
But I understand you guys have an election coming up.
It
Um,
sort of, yeah.
Granted,
Yep.
but I hear that, and I know that Justin Trudeau is reviled in Canada, and rightly so, from everything I've heard. But
Mm-hmm.
and I from one of my contacts in Canada, I've been told that someone who's vying for his position, or someone I think is vying for his position, Pierre Poilievre,
Yeah.
is becoming a little bit more popular. But like the description I got from him, from this friend of mine who's a trusted source, this person makes it clear that this individual is kind of spineless, doesn't take a firm stand, still kind of equivocates. Is that the circumstance you guys are currently in Canada? Because you said something really, really interesting in that dialogue now. Canada is left, left, left.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what even if Trudeau gets kicked out, what's it
Yeah.
what's the future prognostication look like?
Yeah. I mean, to give you the Coles Notes version, all signs are suggesting that he's going to lose the next election and that Pierre Poilievre will be the next prime minister. Um, Poilievre is not, I would not consider him to be he doesn't mince words, in my opinion. He typically comes out in actually a relatively forceful way, and is often the first to come out and say certain things when it comes to anti-Semitism, when it comes to the war in Israel, some of the bigger events that have happened over the last 14, 15 months. He's often the guy that comes out and says things first. Um, and that's great. And I think he could do some really positive things for the country. But I don't think that I think we need to stop looking to Ottawa to solve these problems. they're not going to be able to, and we have to also be real that they have bigger fish to fry. They're not going to worry about 1% of the population. They're not going to worry about the Jews in Canada or other minority groups. They're going to be focused on the economy. They're going to be focused on job growth and housing and taxes and things that determine how people vote and approval ratings. So, I mean, there have been some really damaging trends that have taken root here over the last number of years that it's hard for me to tell exactly when these things became particularly acute, but I would say over the last 10 years, this idea of being settler colonialists, of being imperialists, of supporting genocide, of having been complicit in previous genocides, of all of these sorts of things. They're all rooted in guilt, shame, and guilt, and which is something that is foundational to this idea of sort of wokeism. This is sort of a roundabout answer. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, Mars, but that's the state of affairs right now in Canada. And there's also this element in Canada too, where it's at least I get the sense that in the past, certain politicians would at least pretend, like they would at least pretend to be something, and they would consistently put the act on, and they would convince people. And people would go, "Oh yeah, well, so and so is this way, or that's how they believe, or this is what I think of them." I think it's become so willy-nilly here now that people aren't even attempting anymore. I mean, you have Jagmeet Singh, the head of the NDP, which is the other major political party in the country, one of the other major ones. He's supposed to be a socialist. He's supposed to be a man of the people. He's supposed to be fighting for the little guy. And he pulls up to work recently in a Maserati. It's like they're not even trying anymore. So there's also that element here in Canada and I think that you're seeing some of the similar things in the US and elsewhere, where people just go, the system's not really being challenged. There's no pressure on us to affect change in any substantive way. Like, who cares? It's just buy what we want, do what we want, say what we want. So I'm certainly feeling that here in Canada, where it's like, I think a lot of people here feel politically homeless. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. And that I think people are, and this could be a good thing, looking less and less to elected officials to solve their problems.
I see. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hadassah, you're next. You can unmute yourself.
I think I recognize Hadassah from social media, but I could be mistaken.
So I just have a couple of comments. One thing is that I don't feel that this is a problem of my grandchildren's generation. I'm Jewish. I feel it's a problem of my generation right now, my family, my kids, and my grandchildren at this minute. So it has an immediacy that I'm maybe if you're not Jewish, you don't feel that, but I feel it very, very immediately. I'm also have a comment about, I'm sort of disappointed to hear what you say about Polyev, because I really thought that would make a difference. I see Legault pushing back in Quebec. I mean, he made a public statement and he is pushing back. So I feel our elected representatives do have some kind of obligation to fight this. And I was really pleased. I'm not a francophone by any means, but a member of Clarity who is, and translated Legault's last comments, and we put something out from Clarity Coalition Canada. And honestly, I think the premiers have a responsibility. Our politicians have a responsibility. I think it's outrageous what's going on with our very selected officials who come into constituencies with keffiyehs on.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess my question that I was going to ask earlier is what kind of difference do you think Polyev would make? And I'm
Well,
hearing not
it
nothing.
no, it's not nothing. It's just I'm maybe a little too cynical when it comes to these issues in terms of looking for other people to solve these problems. Look, I think these elected officials do have a responsibility, of course, and I do think that they will make a difference. I'm just not sure that it's going to be to the extent that people might like.
And it doesn't
I
mean that we
just
can just sit back and let
no,
them, we
no,
still
Yeah, I'm
have to,
not
that's
yeah.
trying to sit back, believe me.
No, I know you
Yeah,
don't, Hadassah.
but and I guess the more immediate concern, and this is something really that I don't have that much knowledge in, is how are we as Canadians going to fight this very toxic concept of anti-Palestinian racism? I don't
well,
even have a clue how
it's a
we
very
go about
dangerous
it.
idea. Yeah, yeah.
I'm
Well,
happy to engage in the fight. I don't know enough about how these battles are fought to
yeah.
know where I step into them.
Well, it seems to me like they're being waged in again these places where most people aren't active in, school boards, in unions, in a lot of these frankly left leaning areas that are traditionally occupied by people who you would expect to occupy these positions. I'll just put it that way. So I think that's sort of why I was saying, it's all connected. That's why I'm saying, well, yes, I think Polyev will be good in for the country, but I don't think he's going to be able to solve all of our problems. I think we have to go out there and get into some. We need to find ways to get ourselves involved with these lesser known domains that we just typically, by virtue of our lives and responsibilities and priorities, wouldn't normally operate in. And I think that also historically we go, well, it's just a school board or it's a union, whatever. It's like, but it's becoming increasingly clear to me that that's where a lot of this is playing out. And so these people are actually having a disproportionately large impact on sort of the social, cultural evolution of the country. And so for me, that's where I think we need to look at this fight. That it's not really on Bloor Street. It's not in boardrooms where economic decisions are being made. In my opinion, it's not in a lot of the other sort of areas that impact and determine the trajectory of the nation, where these things are festering and happening. They're in these areas that typically seem sort of back at they're not top of mind spaces, but I think they have to be.
And if I could just add to that, the reason why Legault is being vocal in pushing back is because the Quebecers are vocal in pushing back. So as much as we'd like to rely on politicians or believe in politicians, I personally never do. I think that they are going to do whatever we demand that they do. And right now, I think it's like there are 20 times the amount of Muslims than Jewish people in Canada right now. We, as Canadians, most of us, non-Jewish Canadians, we need to pay attention. Like Casey was saying, we can't just, say, that's not our problem. That's over there. Like we have to all get involved. We have to let our voices be heard because that's what's going to make the politicians pay attention.
Thank you.
Hadassah, you brought up all good points. So I'm with you on everything that you've raised, just so that's clear. I think we probably are very much aligned, even though I maybe didn't say things that were what you expected, but I appreciate everything that you've mentioned.
Thank you.
And I think we're all looking for hope too, because we're all just
Yeah, of course.
exhausted.
Yeah.
And so it would
And
be
that's a
nice to
great word
believe.
for it. It is
Yeah,
exhausting.
yeah. Okay, Evan, you're next.
Okay, yeah. So one of the things I was thinking was to what extent can everything that has been talked about for the last hour or so can sort of be put under sort of basically the label of like progressive and advancing for civilizations? Because one of the issues is, and this is something that's been like an issue for decades, is that this whole idea of like, oh, what does it mean to be progressive and what does it mean to be advanced?
Hmm.
Because Canada and Europe, and also you could say like the American coastal cities, and all the urban areas where a lot of like the jobs are, well, a lot of scholarship comes from. There's a desire to sort of like, be like forward thinking and enlightenment and progressive. And so what's happened was like, I should say, certain branch of leftism coming and took it over and said that if you want to fit this label, you want to be a progressive, you want to be advanced and enlightened, you have to advocate for the destruction of Westernism, the destruction of like
Right,
liberalism,
right,
the destruction of that, and you have to believe that like, Jews are now like, they've come from being like not white or alien enough to being attached to that sort of liberalism and Westernism. Like the Jews are
yeah,
attached to that, so that's why you have to be like against the Jewish sovereignty, and you have to consider Jews as an enemy. So it's perhaps the issue at hand is what can be done so that like how can you fix it so you can say that no, actually what we've been advocating for is actually the part of like being progressive and enlightened and forward thinking. Like how can you push that away and say what we've been talking about for the past hour is actually proper progressivism and advanced
right.
thinking.
Oh, well, these are really tough questions. I mean, this would be like a PhD dissertation or something like that. I think I don't have there's no easy answer, no easy way for me to answer you, Evan. I think that you're spot on, that people's view of, you know, people's view of not just of what it means to be left or progressive is so often backwards, but I think the way people see themselves and the way that they've tethered their own identity, anchored their own identity to these ideas is extremely problematic. And so, in a way, we have to start chipping away at, again, I sort of mentioned this earlier, how people see themselves in these issues and reminding people that a lot of what they're actually advocating for would lead to their own destruction, and is probably antithetical to actually who they are as a person or who they want to be as a person. So I think in some ways it might come down to the individual and, um, you know, reorienting how people see themselves in some of these ideological sort of movements, which leads me to another point, which it's connected to what I was saying earlier, just the power of ideas, the power of communicating. When I say that, you don't try not to be the second or the fifth person that says something, you can be the first. That doesn't mean it has to be in front of, a community group or at a large meeting. That can be with one person. That could be with a friend or a colleague or maybe somebody that you just sort of know in passing. But we have to start talking with people and communicating with people more consistently. And we've lost our abilities to do that, whether it's through social media or the pandemic maybe exacerbated things. But people aren't talking with each other enough, and they've lost the ability to have real conversations with each other and to see, you know, humanity in one another. And we have to be able to have tough conversations without the fear of being labeled intolerant or racist or bigoted, because I think we would be those things if we weren't having the conversations that we are. Again, that's a very hard question to answer. I don't know if Yasmine has any thoughts on that, but that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you, Casey. Thank you, Evan, for the question. Naya, you're next.
Hi, Yasmin. So I always say that I had a Jewish auntie because my mother's side is Jamaican, my father's side is Guyanese. So I had a Jewish auntie. I just didn't know she's a Zionist. She's a Zionist. Without her, like a large section of my family wouldn't exist. So it's kind of a family issue, kind of. Um, the thing that is annoying me with throughout all of this, and I always bring it back to the Black community because we have in the United States, I'm from DC, we have social currency. and we're able to carry the message abroad, like seriously. And, you know, everybody bringing MLK and all of this. Look, I've been telling people, when my people came from Africa and came into the Caribbean, or when our people came, a little bit of people came to the Americas, when our people fought for freedom, we were fighting to improve the government. Now, in the Caribbean, we're fighting against British colonialism. But like in Haiti, okay, they eliminated all the white people. But generally, we weren't trying to eliminate white people. Like in like Trinidad and Guyana, where my father's side of the family is from, we learned to have like it's like Middle East, like the dream of it. We have an integrated environment. Like Guyana and Trinidad, we have East Indians, we have Africans, we have Chinese, and we learn to get along because we have to. Like we can't like separate and like exterminate each other because we each other has a vital part of our
That's
culture.
right.
For example, like roti, curry goat, roti, like jerk chicken. Like I know it's like food, but the Caribbean, it's an example like all cultures merging. Like it's the Middle East, like all cultures merging. Like that's how it is. The thing about it that is so upsetting to me is that they are using our cause for their movement. Because I thought I was like lulled in first. I thought, well, you know, the pro-Palestinian movement, you know, they were for civil rights, you know, and their movements were, you know, the same. And there was this one, I thank God, like this one Jewish lady, she was a baker, and I was getting very extreme. And I was like, you know what, my fat self is not going to go into Gaza and fight. I'm just not. So I started to listen to her. And then once I started to advocate for Israel, I started being called a sellout. I started having people block me. Like I was showing this lady, like literally like pictures of like women being raped. And she was like, well, I fundamentally disagree. And I'm like, what? Because I'm like, right now, I'm like, that's a section of my family. And I'm thinking to myself, like my uncle, he told me about my aunt's family being like exterminated in the Holocaust. And like my cousin literally wanting to connect to her Jewish roots. So I'm like thinking in my mind, if my cousin was in Southern Israel, because she's like a friendly person, these idiots would have no problem with my family literally being raped and tortured and killed. I'm like, wait a second. That's my family now. And so it is getting kind of personal. And my question is, why are we as Black people and as other people are so latched on and are not willing to examine like the true elements of this movement? Because I watched the Axe Project on YouTube because I thought, okay, they wanted a state. I watched video after video after video, and I was like, oh, they don't want a state. They want a Jewish Middle East. I said, oh, okay. How okay, oh. And it was like, you not realize they just vote them out. I said, oh. And then the thing that probably like the population of Israel is that I didn't know there were a lot of Middle Eastern Jews. It's like I was ignorant. Like I just thought y'all had trees earlier. I didn't know.
And 2 million Arab Israelis.
Yeah, I had to learn that one of the reasons why I started to believe you were native to the Middle East is because like I learned like a lot of Mizrahim Jews are like from Morocco and Tunisia. I know it's probably ignorant, but that's how like, okay, oh, they're native to the Middle East. I don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
And so I'm just wondering, but it took for me being sympathetic to that Jewish woman who was a baker for me to examine. And I'm just wondering, why is it so hard for people just to, because I have no genetic ties to that region. Like my cousins have, but I don't. So I'm just wondering, why are we allowing for this movement to like hijack our communities, hijack our stories, and basically have us be bending over, because at this point, for terrorists. Like,
is it Naya?
Yes.
Naya, I think it's, first of all, I think that your experience with that particular baker is not, I have heard that version so many times through my life, where people have just said, and not just with Jews, like the other, with other groups of people having, people being exposed to ideas, powerful ideas that have challenged their preconceived ideas about certain things, just by somebody they bumped into at a laundromat or at a restaurant, or sometimes that's all it can take. But we've learned actually over at least the last decade, as a people, and I'm talking just through the West, primarily Canada and the US. I'm here in Canada. I spent a lot of time in the US. We're now obsessed with division, like division and being siloed, and we've lost the idea of having being sort of harmonious, a collective. That's been chipped away at, and I believe a lot of that is politically, for political gain and ideological gain. So I think there's that. As I noted, people are also busy. They see these things going on as sort of external or on the periphery of their own lives. They don't, in Vancouver, when there's a woman part of Samidoun, which is now a listed terrorist organization in Canada, she's standing with a megaphone saying, in Vancouver, we are Hamas, we are Hezbollah.
Death to Canada.
Yeah, I think people, they'll go, oh God, whatever. Yeah, I'll get a caramel macchiato, please. Can you make that half sweet? Like, they don't see themselves. They just think it's sort of nutty and whatever, and it's people being loud.
But see, my community thinks different. See, my community is trying to get involved in this movement. Not only that, but my Black community was so involved. I told them months prior.
Right.
I said, wait a second. When election day come, I said, because you give your leg, you give your school, you give everything, they're going to turn against you. And I was seen as a sellout, and still am. That's fine. I'll be an ex-slave, whatever. But the Black community on 11/5 finally woke up. Some of them are like, oh, they ain't us. They don't care about if our community goes, to the wayside. And I'm like, wait a second, it took you all this time.
Well, the same could be said with the LGBTQS community. Any of these people, I would love to see them walk into Gaza or the West Bank, and just see how that goes. Throw on a pair of assless chaps and, let me know how that goes in Can Yunis. So, I think this movement, however we want to think of it, they're not dumb, right? These aren't stupid people. A lot of groups are so flippantly dismissed as just loud and dumb, and they're not dumb. They've really been able to tap into other minority communities and convince them and get them on board. And, a lot of people have forgotten that, we also have short memories, right? Who was it marching arm in arm? You mentioned MLK earlier when you were talking. You go back and look at those photos. There's rabbis in those photos. When you read the works of MLK or Abraham Joshua Heschel or other people, I mean, people forget what communities have been built, what allyships have been built, and they are easily swayed by their short-sightedness, their lack of appreciation of history can be exploited by some of these groups who are not dumb. They're smart, and they come in and they're able to get people on board. And I think, we as I'm talking about myself as part of the Jewish community, other groups, we have to do a better job at reminding people and letting them know and revealing to them that actually these people don't care about you. Like, you would not be welcome in this part of the world, and you would actually be not just ostracized, but you would be forced to be something that you are not. So why are you supporting this cause? People don't know about these things, so we just have to get back to talking with one another. And I would encourage people to be that baker. Be the Jewish baker then. And go talk to somebody, and then they'll talk to somebody else. So that's all I can say right now in the amount of time that I have. But I love that you brought this up, and I really appreciate you and the comments that you just raised.
So you mentioned the time, Casey, and we have a few more questions here, but I'm just going to take one more, and then we're going to have to wrap it up. So Cecile, you're next.
Thank you. I think, Casey, in large part, you answered my question thanks to Naya's brilliant comments. Naya, you made my day. I felt very emotional listening to you, and I can't express how much it means. So I'm just going to make a quick comment instead of asking a question. One of the features of anti-Semitism or Jew hatred is that no one believes us. So we know that in EDI, if you say this is racist, then one of the pillars, the foundational pillars, is to say, I believe you, to listen to the person. As a Jew, if you say this is anti-Semitic or this is Jew hatred, well, you're told that it's weaponized. So, and I can talk about this for too long, but my comment is really to say that I really think that everything you've been saying, Casey, about getting involved and it's really for our allies or whoever they are right now, because we have been silenced. And as an example, there is a Jewish physician who is a counselor with the Ottawa Carleton District School Board who was censored after speaking out against anti-Semitism, as an example. So our voices are ineffective and grossly disrespected. So we really need all of you here to help us out of this mess. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, just to add on to that, I mean, just sort of my own thinking. It was surreal after October 7th to see the Israelis did it right away. Right away they did it because they knew. The Israelis know, and I often tell people we got to be more Israeli. Because they know how to operate. They understand the world and they see the world in a different way that the Jewish diaspora does not. Right away, they made a concerted effort strategically to compile the evidence of October 7th to show it to people because they knew, well, we have to prove our trauma and our grief to people because they won't believe it. Like within days, they were showing congressmen, celebrities, different people, the 40-minute tape that they had put together to convince people. You're seeing women come out publicly in different forums in the Knesset. I believe in the United States, there's been people who've provided testimony publicly from Israel, Mia Shem, other people coming out and saying, they did this to me. I want to tell you what they did to me. They're not coming out and saying these things because they want to. They're coming out and saying these things because they're trying to convince people of the horrors that they've gone through, which is, we could talk about this forever, as you just noted, but
Casey, and you're
at the
giving
root cause, yeah.
Yeah, and Casey, you're giving some high profile examples. I'm talking about those of us that, the little people who are trying to affect change. I wish I had a story of, I was that Jewish baker. No one's listening to me. I'm the person who marched for BLM and trans rights, and I was, told I was woke pre-October 7th. And now, because just this week in several meetings, I challenged embedding the notions of anti-colonialism and anti-oppression in medical education. I'm now the racist asshole.
Right,
so, right. But also, so it's those of us, we feel very disempowered, but that we also know that that's a feature of anti-Semitism is, we're no one is going to say, I believe you. We're going to be told you're weaponizing.
I know what you're saying. I do. Yeah. We just have to keep doing what we can. I think, the worst thing that we can do is let them snuff us out and just go, well, they're not going to believe us. We won't say anything anyway. Just, we can't give up.
And don't underestimate your power, Cecile, because you are dropping seeds. You are spreading flickers of light. You may not see an immediate response or an immediate reaction in the way that you want to see it, You may hear the haters first or whatever, but I promise you, keep going, keep planting those seeds. They will germinate. I mean, I'm telling you, I promise you, this is from personal experience. I'm like screaming against, a tsunami. And I just kept going and going and going and going. And look at us now, this community where we're having these conversations.
Hmm.
I mean, you should have looked at my Twitter back in 2016. I would say one word and I would just be attacked incessantly for days
Mm.
from all sides. And I just kept going, kept going, kept going, kept going because you know what it feels like to be silenced and how it will diminish you. And thinking that if you just allow the bullies to do what they want to do, they're going to leave you alone. Like we've learned through history, that doesn't work. You have to speak up. And your community knows this even more than I do, right? That you just have to continue to push back. You have an amazing history of every single time you are successful, you are surviving, and this will be no different. But you just don't give up hope. And we are here with you. You're not alone. So many Jewish people really feel like completely abandoned after October 7th. And it's exactly how you described, because they were there when it came to the LGBT rights. They were there when it came to BLM. They were there when it came to everything. And then immediately when the tables were turned, it was like nobody was there for them. That is a real deep, dark sense of betrayal, but the mistake is thinking that it has anything to do with you. The mistake is taking this personally
Hmm.
and thinking, what could I have done differently? Or how come they don't like me? Or why don't I matter? Right? You can't let yourself go into that darkness. Just continue spreading your light. And you are doing that. You're doing a wonderful job of that. And I think that you just are feeling, like I said before, you're just feeling really exhausted right now. You're feeling disillusioned. Canada, I mean, it's a tragic story right now, what's happening in our country. Like, if you haven't read that Free Press article yet, it doesn't even cover everything. Barry Weiss wrote this little blurb at the beginning, like she's never printed such a long Free Press article before, but all of this needed to be said. There was so much missing
Yeah.
from it.
Yeah.
Like it's just absolutely unmistakably abysmal what's going on right now. And we all need to be speaking up against it. So I feel you, but I do encourage you to keep going. You're not alone. We're all behind you, and you matter, and your voice matters, and your work matters, and spreading this light matters, and spreading these seeds matter. And we're going to be okay. Truth will conquer hate. I promise.
Yasmine's so much more eloquent and smarter than I am. You should have asked the question to her the first time.
We make a great team, Casey. You bring the intellectual side, and I
No,
bring the the lovey-dovey
yeah,
supportive
I'm getting
side.
choked up over here.
Well, before I let you go, Casey, I just want to make sure that we've touched on everything that you wanted to touch on, that you can share with us other places where we can find you, where we can follow you. You mentioned the project that you're working on with
Yep.
the Macdonald-Laurier. Yeah, is there a podcast that you were telling us about?
Yeah, I mean, everything related to the Promised Land is online on the Macdonald-Laurier's website. I also work a lot with Secure Canada, where we, you know, are trying to come up with new policies, new ways to make life harder for bad guys, whether that's Sammy Dune or the Houthis or other groups. We are focused primarily on matters related to terrorism. So Secure Canada does some amazing work, and Cheryl Saparia there does some fantastic work, and she's in Toronto. So I would encourage people to look into the work of Secure Canada, the Promised Land with MLI, and just keep an eye out, because we're always out there doing things. We're trying to chip away at a lot of the madness, the parasitic thinking that we've been talking about here today. And people can find me on X and wherever else. And I love talking with people and having one-on-one conversations and coming up with new ways and new ideas to improve the situation. So reach out, and I would love to hear from you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Casey, for your time. We really appreciate
Oh, of
all the
course.
expertise
Oh,
and intellect and knowledge and heart and honesty you brought to this conversation. And I'm going to share with you all where you can reach Casey. Some of you here in the chat didn't have a chance to ask your questions, but you will be able to contact him directly because we'll share with you his Twitter and everything else.
Great.
So thank you so much again, Casey, and thank you all. And we'll see you at the next Yasmine Mohammed podcast. Happy holidays, everyone. Take care.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.
After hearing all that, you might be left wondering, what can I do? How can I help? Well, this is why I created a nonprofit called Free Hearts, Free Minds. We are the only organization dedicated exclusively to helping these free thinkers. We empower them with our programs and supportive community, lifting them up so they can heal, speak out, and begin to make positive changes, not just in their own lives, but within the broader community around them. If this is a cause that resonates with you and you want to make a difference, one way to do that is by donating to Free Hearts, Free Minds. Because not enough people care about this cause, we need people like you to help fuel this change. You can donate via our website, freeheartsfreeminds.com. Thank you. Every dollar you donate makes a difference.